Caithness and the north coast of Sutherland is a large area of unspoilt dramatic scenery in the far north of Scotland, indeed on the extreme edge of Europe. The borders of Caithness are the Pentland Firth to the north and the Moray Firth to the east. Caithness meets Sutherland together, covering the far north coast of Scotland. The coast is low-lying on the east and majestic on the north, with high cliffs and offshore stacks at places like Dunscombe Head, Wick and Thurso are the main settlements, based around harbours and making their living on a mix of fishing and tourism. Thurso, the most northerly town on the Scottish mainland. Thurso is a great base for exploring the surrounding countryside. There's plenty to see and do in and around the delightful town of Thurso. The town is a hive of lovely traditional shops, cafes, bars and restaurants. Don't forget to take a look at Thurso Castle, on the eastern side of the river mouth. It dates back to 1100. Not a great deal remains of medieval old Thurso, except for the roofless old St. Peter's Church. Parts of this date back to the early 1100s, and it seems to have been expanded and altered at various points over the next 7 centuries, before being abandoned in 1832, after a period of closure. Old St. Peter's Church and the surrounding churchyard are again open to the public and are well worth a visit. Journey back in time into Dornoch's troublesome past. Vikings and Picts, clans and clearances, witchcraft and suspicion, it's all here. Dornoch has a great beach, a medieval cathedral, a courthouse and old jail, a castle which is now a hotel, wonderful shops and bags of charm. We're staying at the Beach Bar and Grill in Lossiemouth, another motorhome friendly establishment. When you park your van round the back, you've got a marvellous sea view, and all you need to do is buy a couple of drinks or have a meal. Today's Lossiemouth has seen many changes. The eastern harbour has been converted into a spectacular yachting marina. while the railway sheds that used to service it have been swept away in favour of harbourside houses and flats. The northern harbour continues to protect vessels of all shapes and sizes, and there remains a resident fishing fleet and a fish market there. Lossiemouth grew on a grid pattern combining many small fishing cottages either side of some strikingly wide streets such as Commerce Street, plus a few grander buildings like the library and the 3-storey harbourside block that now houses the Fisherman's Museum. You tend to describe Lossiemouth as unorganised rather than pretty, but it does have a welcoming atmosphere. Lossiemouth has more to offer than its harbours, and the regular plan of the town itself. Visitors can also enjoy 2 superb beaches here. One, West Bay, stretches for 3 miles to the west, beyond the headland, housing Coventry Lighthouse.
Don't do any run break. They don't do any of my stuff. Don't who are running.
Fishing has been carried out at Cullen for at least 500 years. The harbour was built in 1817 and was once busy with herring fishing. Today it is used mainly by pleasure craft. The village specialised in the export of smoked haddock and had at one time 3 large curing houses. The Moray Firth is home to one of only 2 resident populations of bottlenose dolphins in Britain. Watch carefully, and you may spot the dolphins leaping and playing. Cullen is an extremely attractive town. The town is in 2 parts, sandwiched between the sea wall on one side and the main road on the other. It is a fishing village, sea town of Cullen. This is a unique collection of a couple of hundred small stone fishermen's cottages at the seaward side. Wandering around Seatown is a slightly otherworldly experience. It was obviously a planned community. Fraserburgh lies on the north-facing coast of Buchan, just after it has rounded the corner from Aberdeen towards Inverness. In effect, it stands at the end of one side of the mouth of the Moray Firth. The town had an early start, being chartered in 1546, and was already in use as a harbour before the first stone pier was built here in 1576. There's more to St Andrews than golf courses, including the remains of St Andrews Cathedral, which was Scotland's largest cathedral, and a most magnificent church. This shows how impressive it used to be. St Rude's Tower in the precinct is part of the first church of the Augustinian canons at St Andrews, built in the early 12th century. St Andrew's Castle was built for the bishops and suffered at the hands of their enemies. Most of what you can see dates from between 1400 and 1560. Anstruther was the capital of the Scottish herring industry until the shoals deserted the Forth during the Second World War. Boats still sail out from the harbour bringing in shellfish. Anstruther is the largest in a string of pretty old-fashioned fishing villages along the stretch of the Fife Coast known as East Neuk. Perhaps the top attraction is simply tucking into a quality fish supper from the Anstruther Fish Bar, which in recent years has won a number of awards, including UK Fish and Chip Shop of the Year. Enjoy the locally caught fish by the harbour as fishing boats land their catch. The name Pittenweem can be roughly translated from Pictish and Gaelic to place of caves. It is now famous for its well-preserved merchant buildings, characterised by their white walls and red roofs, influenced by Fife's trading links with Belgium and the Netherlands. Giles House was built in the first half of the 17th century for Captain James Cook, who carried Charles II to France after his defeat at the Battle of Worcester. The palace, a grand merchant's house, was built in several stages between 1597 and 1611 by Sir George Bruce, a descendant of the Scottish King Robert the Bruce. Culross Townhouse, 1626, contains the former council chamber, courtroom and prison cells. Witches were confined in the upper attics. There are 2 original painted ceilings. The royal borough of Culross nestles in a hollow on the Fife side of the Firth of Forth, known as Torrey Bay. It now consists mainly of 16th and 17th century architecture. Saint Cerf is believed to have founded the monastery here in the 5th century. In the 6th century, Saint Mungo, who founded Glasgow Cathedral, was born in Culross. Take a stroll up the cobbled alleyways, known as Back Causeway, which is complete with a raised central aisle that was formerly used by noblemen to separate them from the commoners. These are the remains of a religious powerhouse whose enterprising monks mined coal as well as praying for salvation. Saint Cerf is believed to have founded a monastery here in the 5th century. The monastery was founded in 1217 on the hill crest, but only fragments of it remain. The tower, now incorporated into the Abbey Church, is thought to have been built in the 16th century. Oh, we do love to be beside the seaside, and the folk of Fisher Row are no exception. Promenading, that much favoured Victorian pastime, remains as popular today, with or without a dog. You can still buy ice creams locally. Barks and fishing boats have given way to yachts and dinghies. Water skiing began in the 90s, followed 20 years later by the Scotland-wide phenomenon of coastal rowing. This is all that's left of the historic St Andrew's Kirk. Mary Queen of Scots came here during some of the most turbulent times of her life. 2 days after her husband, Lord Darnley, and other lords' successful plot to murder Rizzio in 1566, she escaped to Dunbar, riding for 5 hours whilst pregnant with Darnley's son, who became James VI of Scotland. Mary rallied her supporters at Dunbar and returned triumphantly to Edinburgh a week later, when those who carried out the murder had fled to England. Mary returned to Dunbar Castle later that year. Down the hill from this end of the High Street is Dunbar's Victoria Harbour, built in the 1640s, and the final death knell for most of the remains of Dunbar Castle. The opposite corner of the harbour is occupied by the fortified artillery battery, whilst further to the southeast, again, is the Cromwell Harbour. The completion of this in 1730 led to Dunbar's dramatic growth as a fishing and, for a time, whaling port. In the 18th and 19th centuries, whilst a thriving fishing port, Eyemouth also became notorious as a centre for smuggling. As the Scottish port nearest to the continent, it became the most accessible place for the illicit import of spirits and other goods. The historic town of Eyemouth, 5 miles north of the border with England, boasts a natural harbour and fine coastal scenery. In the 19th century, the fishing industry flourished on the basis of haddock and herring fishing. But the port suffered a devastating blow on the 14th of October 1881. A storm wrecked the fishing fleet, and 189 fishermen, 129 from Eyemouth alone, were drowned, many within sight of the shore. Gunn's greenhouse was built to an Adam design in about 1753 for a successful Eyemouth merchant called John Nisbet. This must have cost a great deal of money, and it seems likely that his respectable business provided a cover-up for Nisbet's participation in the smuggling trade. The house itself is reputed to have secret passages and a fireplace which could be swung open like a gate, as well as huge cellars large enough to hold hundreds of kegs of smuggled brandy.